go. Keep it coming. Push, 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 push. Push, Max. Let's go. 1, rest.
Go through now is a case study of a Rugby Sevens player we've been working with over the last 6 months. I'll detail the assessments we did for both linear sprinting and change of direction, what our interventions were and what changes we saw over the block. So, about the athlete, he's 22 years old, played as a fullback in Rugby Union and has recently made the transition to focus on sevens full time. His position requires him to be fast, robust and able to handle the high workload seen in Rugby Sevens. And he came to us to work on improving his straight line and change of direction speed over off-season. We'll start with his linear sprinting. Our first assessment with him showed that he was able to get off the mark quickly. His time across the first 10 meters or so was average compared to our elite data set. From there, though, his performance dropped off. He wasn't able to pick up and continue accelerating as you'd expect. Diving deeper into his strategy, 0 to 10, he was reactive and quick on the ground, but he didn't travel, he didn't create big shapes or punch his knee through, limiting his ability to project himself forwards and switch. This limited his ability to pick up and transition in the next section. He's still quick on the ground, but still was weak in projection. In the report, we also saw he could create higher velocities off his right compared to left. For us, when we see this, it's a bit of a red flag. It definitely shows one leg is doing more work than the other and maybe something to look at. And it made sense. He had a history of an MCL reconstruction and hamstring injuries on that left side, as well as multiple ankle sprains on both legs. When we looked at jump assessments, he again showed a big imbalance in his single leg CMJ, favouring the right. His RSI in a single leg 10-5 test was fairly balanced. But looking deeper, he was able to get more height and propulsion off his right, showing it can produce higher forces. Everything so far pointed towards the right leg having dominance, taking more of the work, whilst the left was a bit more limited in its physical capacity. Taking it a level deeper, we also looked at how his body moved in 3D, looking at what strategies he used to solve movements in different planes, how he coordinated joints together. I've got a short clip of Liam talking through this for you now.
In the sagittal plane, you can already see a couple of red flags. The excessive knee valgus on both sides, the limited arm reach, suggesting that there's tension through the trunk and the lumbar, and almost no posterior chain loading through the hip and the ankle. Here it's a bit like he's kind of like balancing on his forefoot. It's like watching a tower kind of like tilt forward and backwards. There's no confidence through the base of support and there's no control higher up. In the frontal plane, the hesitation is even clearer. He can't laterally flex into the stance leg or push his center of mass across his body. And he stays very much in the middle, trying to avoid the risk of collapse. And in the transverse plane, this is where the lack of confidence turns to instability. He tries to rotate, but can't dissociate his pelvis from his trunk. The stable leg stays, like the knee is quite extended, and the foot wobbles with every step. It's like trying to pivot on a tightrope.
So we have an athlete who has fairly good raw physical capacities. The bedrock is there, but also has a pretty severe imbalance and struggles to create stability in big ranges. That was our initial assessment. And so let's look at the interventions we did with him. I'll start with some of the work Liam did with him to improve his mobility.
So some of the drills that we did, we had some Eldoa holds for thoracic and lumbar decompression, some banded ankle mobilizations to target his severely restricted dorsiflexion, some posterior and lateral hip dissociations. Here we've got an example of like a pigeon variation, and also some deep diaphragmatic breathing, whilst encouraging some more thoracic rotation with this thread the needle stretch. The breathing really helped to reduce the sympathetic tone and free up some space. These exercises weren't about chasing flexibility, they were about restoring readiness, giving him access to ranges that he'd been avoiding for years. Moving on to the integrated progressions, once we got access to those joints and those areas, the patterns, we shifted into global movements, starting in safer positions and progressing to more specific demands. Some of the progressions included a kickstand RDL with a foam roll wedge bias. This helps to train the internal rotation of the hip with the stability. Lateral squats onto a box with a frontal plane arm reach, encouraging weight shift and lateral hip activation. And a split squat with frontal and transverse arm drivers, which is, layered complexity on there. As the athlete progressed, we then introduced him to catch and throw patterns, using medicine ball to challenge trunk rotation whilst the stance leg stayed grounded. This built tolerance to load in the transverse plane and helped reconnect the upper and lower halves.
So here's the before and after comparisons. We can see a lot more stability, the movement's far more fluid, and he's able to actively move through those ranges with more control compared to before. Working on his acceleration, our focus was on being big, creating large ranges between his legs, giving him a challenge to create separation. Resisted sprints were used throughout his training. These were a core part of his sessions, really helping him feel the movement, explore his new ranges, but at slower speeds. Here's a really nice progression of his resisted runs from the same day. This was about 3 months into working with him. So what stands out? First off, he pushes himself up and forwards on the right, rather than just leaning forwards at his hips. He punches his knee high and gets himself into a great position at toe off. The next step, he can do the exact same thing, throw his knee forwards to create projection, giving him space to attack into the ground, and lands a lot more under himself as a result. He doesn't have to wait to push. He can go forward straight away and be more reactive on the ground. These were the key lessons for him, punching his knee and creating space, giving more room for him to attack and be reactive. We broke this down for him in Accel. Then to help him transfer those lessons to upright running, we worked a lot on bounding, challenging him to cover distance and travel. Initially, we worked on just traveling, being big and going forwards. At the start, he would land in front, giving him more time on the ground to create that propulsion. Over the sessions, he learned to attack back, learned to land under himself more so he could be stiffer and more reactive. Then it was about applying those same things as he transitioned into Max V. It was about creating force to travel whilst also being stiff.
What I've seen is some really nice changes from what you were doing before Christmas specifically, even where you're at when we first started and where you're at now. I could describe them, but I want you to describe them. So what do you think if someone saw you running or your own feelings of your acceleration specifically? Because I think that's been our biggest focus.
Yeah.
What were you doing before? What was your mindset about what good acceleration should feel like? And how's that flipped now?
Before I was very flicky. My stride length is pretty short.
Yeah.
So now I'm just trying to land underneath me so I can push forward instead of breaking myself and just fall. I was falling into my steps before, whereas now I'm actually projecting myself forward to increase that.
So falling into your steps, that's what you're doing. That's what your habit was. How did that feel?
I felt like I couldn't really. I was always just trying to play catch up with my legs. I was spinning quite well, but just trying to catch up with myself. So I wasn't really generating any force to push me forward and get me.
So that change in acceleration, for me, has a clear change on the rest of your run without us even talking about it.
Yeah.
Is that how it feels for you?
Yeah, it feels easier to progress the run and upright. And, it feels less of a chore and more natural. My stride length and everything is just already there.
Awesome.
So I can just naturally grow it.
So what actually changed? First off, we can see big improvements in his speed score across both sections. Although his 0 to 10 meter time increased slightly, he was able to set his run up and be faster in the 10 to 20 meter section. His peak velocity at 20 meters also saw some good improvements. Looking step to step, there's a lot more balance across the run between his left and right legs. In November, he had a big imbalance towards his right leg, whereas in April, it's extremely balanced. Both legs are sharing the load. Next, if we look at his strategy, big improvements in his projection and switching. He's creating big shapes, punching more, and then snapping out of them. His reactivity has dropped slightly, spending a bit longer on the floor, but this is made up for by how much further he projects each step. So we can see how he creates bigger ranges from the start. He sets a good platform, and from there, he's able to keep growing into the run. Over the 10 to 20 section, all three of projection, switching, and reactivity have gone up. So not only is he faster in this section, he's also a lot more efficient, putting himself in better positions and setting himself up to transition and carry on from there. In terms of his jump testing, his single leg CMJ on his left leg improved by 17% from December, and this was now actually higher than his right leg. RSI also improved slightly on his left leg in the 10-5, improving height and so creating more propulsion on the ground. His ability to create force on that left leg improved, both in explosive and reactive tasks, whilst at the same time he had far more balance between his legs during sprinting. So some really nice parallels there between what we see on the force plates and what we see out on pitch. What I'll show you now is a series of COD progressions, building up from fundamental lessons of change of direction into high-speed cuts, and then eventually how we progress those learnings into live reactive drills and game-like scenarios. Work started with this athlete in November with an assessment of his 10.05 mechanics. So we can see that he leaves a lot of his braking till the last step, and as a result sinks and spends a lot of time in the hole before he can push out and reaccelerate. So where did we start? The first lessons for him were about being able to come in and decelerate aggressively in the first few steps, landing far out in front of his body and controlling his trunk, rather than spilling forwards as he did in his first rep. We worked on overloaded braking, with a 1080 pulling him in and forcing him to create larger braking forces, figuring out how to not get pulled forwards. And we can see the results in the comparison here. He's running in from the same distance. Just in the top video, he's able to slam on the brakes and stop more quickly, sitting his hips low and leaning back. We took those lessons back into
when you're ready.
5, and we can see that with this comparison.
Yeah,
here.
really cool. Can drop that.
This first rep is from when we started with him back in
Okay.
November. This bottom one is from very recently in March.
Bit better.
His 5:05 time improved, and if we look deeper, his 5:0 time was the same, but the 05, the re-acceleration part of it,
Bit better.
that's where he made huge improvements, mainly from setting himself up to get out of the turn effectively.
What?
It's pretty clear that he's braking more aggressively in his most recent rep. He brings in more speed, whilst his early decel is also higher. This means he's coming in fast and then slamming on the brakes hard in the first few steps. It means he doesn't leave all his braking till the last second. There's a clear difference in the positions. He's controlling his trunk more, sitting lower and landing further in front. All the same lessons that we talked about just before in his linear deceleration. Because he does more of his braking early and he's getting into better positions, his time in the hole is quicker in his most recent rep. He's leaning his trunk more. He's ready for the turn early rather than overspilling a bit as he does on the left. So he's decelerating aggressively, preparing earlier for the turn, which means that he can get out of the turn more efficiently and create propulsion. His first re-Accel step was slightly slower, but he has far bigger range on the right. Taking the lessons from his linear sprinting and applying them here, he's able to be big and travel straight away. From there, our focus moved to 90-degree cuts. We applied the same principles of preparing and braking early so that the plant step can be quick and reactive. These two reps are on the same day, and there's a few things to highlight in this comparison. The first is that his deceleration is more aggressive, and he sits his hips lower on the right. Why is sitting low so important? First off, it lets him create leverage. He can have a larger touchdown distance on his final step. He can throw his foot further out in front of himself. And if we move it forward a few frames, we can see that he's also stiffer. He doesn't compress as much, and his body's ready for the impact on the ground. The last thing to point out is his trunk position. On the right, he's already started leaning into the cut and whipping his shoulders round. This allows him to push off straight away in the new direction. Whereas on the left, he actually still has a bit of forward momentum. He has to do a big crossover in front of himself before he can push off, and ends up running more of a curve than a sharp cut. So how did we get these changes? The lessons had already been taught in the 10.05 and Accel. We just had to connect the dots for him when the angle was shallower. So we overloaded him in a band. We pulled him hard into the cut, forcing him to slam the brakes on and sit his hips to decelerate. Cueing was initially focused on braking aggressively. Then once he found that, it was about how he can whip his shoulders round and turn early into the cut. Then if we move forwards about a month, we can see that he's able to take huge braking steps, very similar to his strategy in the 10.05. What really stands out to me in this rep on the right, he does all of his braking in only 3 steps if we include the plant, rather than the 5 he did initially. Although he takes fewer steps, he does a lot more of each one. And really in terms of transference, that's only good for him. If in a match scenario he can slow himself down in fewer steps, he'll have a lot more time and space to focus on the defender and throw them off or get around them. Sevens is a sport where carrying speed is essential, so we worked on his 45-degree cuts as well, working on bringing in speed and creating displacement off that jab step. Again, this comparison is from the same day in one of our earlier sessions. We can see how he's able to plant further outside of his body, creating more leverage to push off and create separation out of it. Fast forward a few months, and he was able to still have that same touchdown distance, but he could also carry his speed better, be more reactive on the ground, and then re-accelerate out of the cut. All the cuts so far have been pre-planned. He knew where he was going and what action to perform, and this allowed us to break down and teach him the concepts we've just gone through, whilst also preparing his body with high-intensity efforts. We started off by introducing 2 defenders he had to react to, reducing the time he had to process which option was correct, and then initiate the right movement. This is a good start point. The athlete knows what the options are, but there is still a reactive element to it. They have to make a decision on which way to go, and this starts to challenge the speed of their perceptual abilities. Moving on, we introduced a live defender in a small space. His options were open, but the space was small, speeds were low, and he had a lot of time to try to manipulate the defender and create space. It's a step up in terms of complexity. There's a lot more options available, but time pressure is still not overly intense. The next logical step from there was to increase the dimensions, increase the speed, and put pressure on their speed of decision making. This drill was designed to simulate him running down the wing as a defender is covering across, forcing him to decide whether to cut back inside or back his pace and go for it. We started off with the attacker having the advantage, adjusting drill dimensions to give just a straight sprint race to the gate. Then we made it a bit closer. The defender could sweep around more, create more cover, and put more pressure on the attacker to find where the space was. Some reps, he got the decision right, reading the defender well. For example, in this rep where he sees the defender waiting, and so the attacker leaves options open, creates a bit of indecision in the defender, then suddenly backs his pace and goes. There may be some other reps he doesn't, like this one. And it's important to help the athlete explore their options, see what works and what doesn't. That's how the transfer happens, and drills like this are ideal for that. We also saw him applying some of the lessons we covered in the pre-planned cuts. For example, here, he sees the defender drifting across hard, trying to cover, so slams on the brakes quickly and cuts back inside. It's important to break down and teach athletes in controlled scenarios, in scenarios where they can feel and practice the movement. From there, it's about whether they can apply that under pressure. Adding reactive elements reduces the time available and forcing the athlete to choose and select the right option quickly. Layering on added complexity and speed to drills only reduces this time even more and is where we can really transfer the lessons into game action.
Go, 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 go. Keep it coming. Push, 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 push. Push, Max. Let's go. 1, rest.